I'm Stephen Merrill. I'm the author of the book American Reform, The End of Debt Slavery, and Other Common Sense Changes That You Have Been Waiting For. I'm also the director of the Public Funds Clearinghouse here in Phoenix, Arizona. And this is the most important series of the century. Today, we're going to talk about communism, socialism, capitalism, autocracy, and democracy. Every time I hear these things being explained, I mean in every YouTube video and on every website, including explanations from real economists, I hear these things being explained wrong. Either they are so overly complicated that no one understands, or they are just plain wrong. They always mix up the economics with the politics and scare everyone for no reason. And we seem to have a lot of people who seem hell-bent on not allowing the United States to fall into either communism or socialism. So I'm going to break these down for you. This isn't that complicated, and hopefully this finally clears up some of the mass hysteria and confusion. We're going to start with economics. There are only two economic models. They are communism and capitalism. That is either public or private ownership of property. And at their base, this is all that communism and capitalism really mean. Either public or private ownership of property. The incentives of communism, and the reason that some people actually choose it, is equality for citizens, and that the young, the old, and the disabled are supposed to be taken care of. The incentive of capitalism, of course, and the reason that some people choose it, is honest pay for an honest day's work. Neither of these so far sound very evil or objectionable to me. Now here's the problem with communism. To achieve equality, everything is rationed, equally to each citizen. So people begin refusing to work because they are all going to get their ration whether they work or not. As more people refuse, fascism and dictatorship creep in when the government forces people to work in order to prop up the economy. Communism collapses when the elite begin hoarding a lot more for themselves and enough of the people simply refuse to work. And capitalism has the same problem. When prosperity is unregulated and a few are allowed to monopolize so much that they infringe upon the economic and political rights and opportunities of others, as is happening in the United States right now, and as inflation and debt increases and people begin to refuse to work, fascism and dictatorship creep in when billionaires and other oligarchs either force people to work or force them into homelessness, and as the oligarchs take steps to protect their wealth and power. Capitalism collapses when the elite begin hoarding a lot more for themselves and enough of the people simply refuse to work. Remember, a billionaire, or rather an oligarch, has a lot more economic and political power than you. They can get elected or change a law with their own wealth and under their own power. They don't need consensus or grassroots support. All they need to do is make a few phone calls to the right people. One thing that Trump did was prove that to you right in front of your face. Now the question is if you really liked what he did, or was it that you just wanted to see our other politicians get pimp-slapped by someone, which they all deserved? Case in point, Atherton, California, the reportedly wealthiest zip code in America, as reported by the New York Post on August 8th, 2022, even though the state required affordable housing to be included in city planning for funding, the plans were simply dropped at the insistence of billionaire tech mogul Mark Andreessen. Now, socialism in and of itself isn't even really a legitimate economic model. Socialism is what you get when you combine some communism with some capitalism. Some property is public and some is private. Some goods and services are rationed and some are bought and paid for by individuals who work and pay for the products themselves. Citizens aren't exactly equal, and the young, the elderly, and the disabled are taken care of in varying degrees. Get it? Quit overcomplicating things. It's that simple. Now, moving on to politics. There are two and only two political models. They are autocracy and democracy. Either one person or a small group holds the power and control of the government, or the people hold the power. Sure, there are a lot of different names for both autocracy and democracy, but they all fit into either one or the other of these two categories. They are all either autocratic or democratic. Either an autocratic holds dictatorial power or the people hold democratic power. Now remember that, it's important. Autocracy means that one person or an elite group holds the power. Words that describe autocracy include absolute, totalitarian, authoritarian, puritanical, and draconian. Types of autocratic governments include royalty and aristocracy, which include kings and queens, or monarchy, theocracy, oligarchy, fascism, and other forms of dictatorship. The person or group who holds the power dictate, that is, they tell the citizens what the rules are. Under autocracy, power is not shared, and the dictator is sovereign. Democracy means that power is shared and held equally by the people. Words that describe democracy include constitutional, elective, and mutual. Types of democratic governments include congressional, republican, and parliamentary. Under democracy, the people share power equally, and the people are sovereign. Theocracy and anarchy are special cases. Theocracy is autocratic. Theoretically, the power is held by God, or more specifically, by the leaders of the church. Theocracy is absolute, totalitarian, authoritarian, puritanical, draconian, fascist, and as dictatorial as those who lead the church want it to be. Examples of theocracy include the Catholic and Mormon churches, the Amish sect, and the entire nations of Saudi Arabia and Iran. Anarchy is democratic. It is the most misunderstood and misrepresented of all the types of government. Anarchy and chaos are actually opposites, even though most people wrongly consider them to be exactly the same. But they aren't. When you hear someone yelling, "Anarchy!" violently, angrily, chaotically, and with their arm held high and like they want to overthrow the government, they should actually be yelling, "Chaos!" Anarchy, as opposed to popular belief, simply cannot exist in chaos, mayhem, and violence. Anarchy literally means without government, but it can only exist in peace. In fact, true anarchists believe that the only way to achieve peace and true freedom is to eliminate government and government control. But they know that anarchy cannot exist in a state of dishonesty, intolerance, lawlessness, or violence. So just because anarchy calls for eliminating government does not mean that it doesn't have rules. Anarchy does have rules. The rules are simple and imperative. The rules are that citizens must be reasonably honest, peaceful, forgiving, tolerant, and fair, for without these, the anarchy falls into violence and chaos. Minarchy, by the way, is similar to anarchy. Minarchists believe that some government is necessary, but that any parts of government that are not absolutely necessary should be eliminated. Okay, now back to our topic: communism, socialism, capitalism, autocracy, and democracy. Right now, here in America, even though most people will denounce Karl Marx and his book, The Communist Manifesto, most people will tell you that the United States is a capitalist nation. But to say that the United States is capitalist also means that you believe Karl Marx. That may not be the look that you're going for. Karl Marx was wrong about America. Sure, we have a free and open market, and we privately own our businesses and homes, but we have always had public libraries, public schools, public health care, public national parks. In fact, our entire government apparatus is a public entity. In fact, the United States simply cannot exist without a public government. Now remember, when you combine public and private, or communism with capitalism, you get socialism. And the truth is that America, like it or not, has always been socialist. So whenever you hear the talking heads berating socialism or insisting that they aren't going to allow the United States to fall into communism or socialism, then what you need to recognize is what they are really saying is that they want to eliminate things that need to be public, like our very government itself. Instead of trying to prevent communism, or rather socialism, what we need to be guarding against is autocracy, oligarchy, fascism, and dictatorship. Now here's where the rubber meets the road. The following are a couple of areas where I believe that America needs reform. First, we have a credit-based central bank. Ever since the Federal Reserve Act went into effect back in 1913, our central bank has been loaning every penny ever placed into circulation. This loan creates the national debt, and income taxes are collected every year to pay this debt. Now here is where it gets dicey. Who does our money, when it is first printed and coined, belong to? Does the money belong to the people of the United States as a whole? Is it public? Or does the money belong to the federal government? Or does the money belong to the Federal Reserve Bank? Or to someone else? The question here is our money public or private? If our money is public and belongs to the people as a whole when it is first printed and coined, then why are we allowing the Federal Reserve Bank to charge us interest to borrow it? Paying interest to borrow money that already belongs to us? Who does that? According to the U.S. Debt Clock website, usdebtclock.org, the United States currently has a debt-to-GDP ratio of 121%, and every single United States citizen owes, as of November 28, 2022, $93,892 each towards this so-called national debt. That's $247,882 per taxpayer and $469,460 for a family of five. Did you catch that? We are bankrupt, underwater, and every infant that is born right now owes $93,892 to the Federal Reserve Bank. Owing that much just for being born or just for being a citizen just isn't right. Furthermore, it's technically impossible to ever pay off this national debt under the current law. The way things are set up, we have to keep borrowing more and more money just to pay the interest with. Do I have your attention now? Look, we need reform. The solutions to the problems, the reforms that we need to fix this, are laid out in the American Reform book and the rest of the videos on this channel. The main points of the American Reform book include the Public Reserve Act and the non-credit-based central bank model that will abolish the national debt and end debt slavery. We need a new central bank model that simply spends instead of extorts citizens by loaning newly printed money into circulation. We need to recognize that the national debt and the credit-based central bank model is extortion and debt slavery pure and simple. Not only is the bank charging us interest to use our own money, but the national debt can never be paid off under the current law. Paying interest to borrow your own money? Who does that? A regulated prosperity and a fair share of the American dream. We need to start making the wealthiest citizens either spend, donate, or be taxed until their wealth is within what can be considered a fair share of the American dream by the end of every year. We don't need to cap income, but we need to prevent excessive hoarding without punishing those who spend or donate enough on their own. Also, we can prevent or eliminate homelessness entirely by making our tax laws tax those who can afford to pay taxes rather than foreclosing on and forcing those who can't afford to pay into homelessness. A new oath and pledge of allegiance. We need a new pledge, one that everyone can agree with, live by, honor, and sign. Online voting and voting reform. We need to abolish criminal disenfranchisement because it is a persistent vestige of segregation. We need more term limits. We need to abolish the Electoral College. We need to count every registered voter during every election. We need to be able to vote online, and we need to be able to impeach, convict, recall, or fire any public representative or employee and replace them within 1 week, and we need to be able to do it all online. New Homestead Act. We need a new Homestead Act that guarantees every citizen some land, basic housing, and some water. Some citizens are being arrested just for being homeless, and we are locking them in cages just to give them these basic services. Every person in jail or prison gets basic housing, food, and water. We should no longer be forcing citizens to be subjected to absolute totalitarian, puritanical, communist, fascist dictatorship and torture in order to give them these basic services. Education and healthcare reform. Every school and hospital should be 100% public and 100% nonprofit. We need to do a much better job educating our kids before they run into problems with the criminal justice system. We need to start paying every student while they are in school and doing their schoolwork. No kid that is doing their work should be subjected to being forced to accept a free lunch. If they're doing their job, then they should be able to afford to buy their own. The capitalist incentive of doing work is that you get paid. We don't expect anyone else to work for free. Why do we expect our kids to work for free? We shouldn't. And the same goes for healthcare patients, and doctors need to be paid a salary like teachers are. Patent and copyright reform. Patents and copyrights create monopolies. Monopolies inhibit competition, which increases prices. Instead of giving out patents and copyrights for new inventions and art, we need to create a new government agency funded by the Public Funds Clearinghouse that publicly funds new inventions and art. It should kind of work the way it works at NASA. Instead of patents and copyrights, we should offer limited assistance in building turnkey production facilities for inventors to build their new inventions in. If they keep prices low and quality high, then they will maintain an advantage. And regulated prosperity will keep things fair. Trademarks instead of patents should protect both new inventors and artists instead of patents and copyrights. Criminal justice reform. Incarceration and capital punishment are enslavement, and they are just wrong. We must therefore completely abolish both. Instead of locking people in cages and subjecting them to torture and absolute totalitarian, puritanical, draconian, communist, fascist dictatorship, we need to begin exiling civil rights violators, fascists, and other criminals out of America and to another nation or to a reservation. Not a prison, but a place where they can survive under their own power. We have to stop torturing these people, locking them in cages, separating them from their loved ones, and then dumping them back into society and expecting them to be honest, peaceful, tolerant, and fair people. We need to change our laws to prevent wrongful convictions, and then we need to start exiling those who really are dishonest, violent, dangerous, and who really don't live by or honor our cornerstone rights and principles to other nations or to a reservation specifically for them. We need to accept that they are human beings and that they have a right to live freely amongst their peers. All of these points are discussed in more detail in the American Reform book, which is available online or by donation or in the rest of the videos in the series on this channel. A video of the book will be available on this channel soon. Sadly, and all too often, I hear of great ideas, and in fact, many people who have heard me talk about my own ideas say, well, that's a great idea, but where are you going to get the money from? And even worse, well, that's a great idea, but the rich will never let that happen. This series explains exactly where the money is, where it is going to come from, and how we are going to phase out those excessively wealthy, the oligarchs who want to privatize our public programs and keep their excessive wealth in the status quo. We need people who agree and will unite to protect the economic and political rights and opportunities of all of our citizens. Global warming isn't a hoax, folks, and neither is debt slavery. It's time to begin taking these steps. Thank you for listening and for your continued support of the American Reform book and the Friends of the Public Funds Clearinghouse. If you would like to buy merch, volunteer, donate, or help in any way, of course, please contact me. Steve Merrill, Director, Public Funds Clearinghouse, merrillsteve13@gmail.com, 623-383-1717. Let's roll.